the human versus god conflict is a trope as old as literature itself. The idea that a mere mortal could rebel against its creator is a powerful one, because it speaks to the very nature of our existence, that of an apex species that has long since established dominion over the earth, and yet remains under the yoke of an overwhelming force it has no hope to surpass or comprehend. Throughout centuries, there have always been men to refuse that status quo and reject the celestial reign, with their journeys invariably inscribing themselves in the great tapestry of human history that stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Odysseus constitute. In those tales, divinities often serve as obstacles to overcome in order to reach an end goal, but rarely represent the objective in itself, as their might would make them too steep a wall to climb, relegating them to the role of external influences which never engage with the heroes directly. Record of Ragnarok saw that archetype and thought, you know what would be fun? If the humans actually clashed against the gods for once, instead of just being puppets of fate. This mission statement sums up the entire plot of the show, as it's basically a modern version of the Armageddon, except this time mankind gets to have an active role in the matter, rather than being relegated to the sidelines. It's not deity versus monster anymore, it's janitor versus creation. And since our fighters in the sky have decided to wipe us from the face of the earth, now's the time to engage in a gigantomachia of our own and reclaim our right to exist. With defeat spelling death, the stakes have never been so high for humanity, and this is why reading/watching Record of Ragnarok will make you want to transcend Godhood.
果たして人類はこの先1000年の存続を手にすることができるのか。
人間よ、祈るのはおやめなさい。私たちが倒さなければならない相手はあなたが今祈っている神なのですから。
Right off the bat, I must say that I highly encourage you to check out the manga instead of watching the anime, as the quality of the adaptation ranges from mediocre to downright terrible. On top of that, the Netflix series straight up skips several key moments of the story, and considering how light the plot is to start with, there really isn't any reason as to why you shouldn't just read it instead. The one thing that gives a slight edge to the TV version is the fact that most characters are even buffer on screen than they were in the panels. But that could also be perceived as a weakness, considering that some of the physiques that used to look achievable now appear completely unreachable after the transition. Of course, this makes sense for the gods, as the cast of divinities should naturally appear out of this world. But for the humans, it made sense that they would be slightly less visually impressive, as despite being the strongest representatives of mankind, they're still of earthly nature. This is important, because the group of legendary mortals fighting for survival will be the focus of this recommendation video. The first of these warriors is Lu Bu, aka the Flying General, and if you thought the champions of humanity were going to be model citizens, then think again, because this guy is pretty much the anime version of Genghis Khan. To defeat gods, you sometimes have to resort to demons. And who better to stick it up to them than a guy who spent the best part of his existence destroying their creations for fun. When your idea of a chill afternoon is storming a battlefield and turning enemy soldiers into shish kebab, you automatically showcase all of the necessary qualifications to become a Titan Slayer. Bonus point if you also look incredibly bored doing so, as if impaling 3 dudes and holding them at arm's length was no more exciting than filling your taxes. It would be ironic for one of the most bloodthirsty soldiers the world has ever seen to come to its rescue, but in truth, Lu Bu isn't in for that. To him, this tournament isn't about humanity's survival. After all, he's made a career out of killing as many people as possible, so why would the gods doing the same thing evoke any feelings of revolt in his heart? No, to a warrior of his ilk, Ragnarok means one thing and one thing only: the opportunity to clash against entities so supreme that their very whims can dictate the fate of the world. Being too strong can become boring, and when the metaphorical representation of your frustration is you screaming naked atop a mountain of corpses, this is a chance that you won't let slip through your fingers. As you've noticed, he's also extremely muscular. Get used to it, because every character in this show is some level or another of jacked. We're talking about a manga where even the weapons can get a pump, as if they were actual extensions of the fighters' bodies, ready to burst at any moment and eager to gorge themselves on the blood of the enemy. Getting crushed by a hammer is one thing, but getting mugged by it beforehand is just adding insult to injury. And if you think that's ridiculous, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. This show's second name is ridiculous. Case in point, Lubu actually stood up after having both of his tibias crumble underneath him, because as you all know, bones are just a social construct, and pure willpower alone is all you need to overcome any injury. There's no mistaking it. He's a massive Chad. Even when he was already the strongest being on Earth by far, he still continued to train his ass off to become better. We're not talking about a few push-ups here. Lubu's idea of a good workout is climbing up a mountain somewhere and swinging his weapon thousands of times until it breaks. At which point he just grabs a new one and does it again. If that doesn't make you want to drop everything and go train, I don't know what will. Add to that the fact that he's built like a freak and you got yourself the perfect role model to follow in order to leave humanity behind. Of course, the gods he is facing are just as dominant, which leads to peak anabolic panels such as this one depicting the final clash between the general and Thor, with the two of them looking straight up demented in the type of all-out final attack that is so reminiscent of Dragon Ball Z. I mean, take one look at these faces and tell me that it doesn't make you want to stack a barbell and go for a set of deadlifts to failure. You might not like it, but this is what peak intensity looks like. The entire saga is in the same vein. Just an endless succession of Homeric clashes where each character wants nothing more but to pull off the head off of their opponent's body. There's no room for the power of friendship here. This is all about that feeling of domination you sense raging in your guts when you're aggressively hyped about lifting. If this is a sensation you enjoy, Record of Ragnarok is full of it. Not every instant has to be that momentous, and the show knows not to take itself too seriously, which is sort of a must considering its bombastic premise. Without some touches of humor here and there, the narration could have quickly become suffocating, as not every series can get by with just pure unabashed alpha vibes a la Grapplebaki. Especially considering that in terms of scenario, Ragnarok gets desperately dwarfed by pretty much every single martial arts series out there. It's not an issue, however, since the only plot this manga really needs is a basic tournament setting, the rest of the storytelling taking place during combat, as most of the lore comes from pre-existent mythological backgrounds. Having auto-generated characters allows for much more freedom in terms of presentation and narrative use. This is how you end up with Adam the First Man as a contestant, showing up in the arena only wearing a fig leaf and presented as the ultimate survivalist, which is both hilarious and thematically appropriate, or why there is an entire section dedicated to Zeus dancing to Hermes' tunes. These moments of goofiness aren't random, as despite participating in the pacing of the show, they never really break or alleviate the feeling of pressure that weighs on the entire Ragnarok manga. If anything, they add to it, as the slight touch of harmless fun they bring is quickly dissipated by the persistent reminder that this is a fight for humanity's survival. Case in point with Zeus, who went from busting out his best moves to giving Adam the death stare while casually reminding him that as the fighter of the skies, he has the ability to break his neck faster than you can snap into a Slim Jim. Our most ancient ancestor would respond to that provocation in kind, electing to face the most physically imposing god with his fists alone, a choice that is not only ballsy as fuck, but also exemplifies the spirit of competition that has led us to becoming the dominant species of our planet. In the eyes of a god, this behavior can only be seen as foolish, since they are watching this struggle atop their mountain of might, quite aware of the distance that separates them from us. Just look at this guy. He's making that teacup look like a toy set with how hard he's mugging it. It's not difficult to imagine why someone like him would find the very idea of humans rebelling against his kind to be ridiculous. But this is exactly why this entire concept is so motivating. It's by doing things no one expected us to do that we became number one. And the only way for us to keep progressing forward is to continue being the crazy, relentless murder apes that we've always been, regardless of what the universe thinks of it. That type of mindset is what births miracles. And this is exactly what Adam represents. His fight against Zeus constituting a sort of meta tournament within Ragnarok itself, as he is facing the one formerly responsible for the extinction of his sons and daughters. Remember when I told you that Zeus could easily snap his neck? What Jupiter didn't know is that this was opposite day, both literally and figuratively, as the champion of humanity punched him so hard that his head did a 180. That way, he got to watch Adam pull off the cool anime pose that every shonen hero does after striking their opponent, instead of, putting up a guard or dodging. Which wasn't necessary here, considering that one hit was all it took to KO Zeus. Or so you thought. This is the Godfather of Cosmos we're talking about here. The deities selected to face the envoys of mankind are all monsters amongst their peers, and rightfully so, since this show wouldn't be nearly as inspiring if the opposition was made up of small fry. Considering how prideful the gods are, it also makes total sense that they would send their strongest member to face the first man, and that Zeus would insist on using all of the strength at his disposal to crush humanity's hope. And what better power-up for an end boss than to literally turn into a hunk of muscles and despair? Record of Ragnarok is far from being the first show to use that trope, as the character of Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho was entirely based around this mechanism. But the one manga that should immediately come to mind when seeing that transformation is Grappler Baki, Adamas being a direct reference to the final fight of the Maximum Tournament arc, that saw Jack Hanma use a similar technique to compress his body and turn into the perfect killing machine. When a manga's idea of a badass ultimate move consists of making the character more buff, you know you're in good hands. Of course, this metamorphosis serves only one goal: setting up the scene for an epic face-to-face between the two characters, with their fists as only weapons. I'm not going to spoil it for you because it would be criminal, but know that this fight alone justifies reading the entire series. It is that good of a brawl, in part because Zeus is a literal mountain of muscles, but mostly because Adam is just too cool. His persona is the anti-Lubu. He doesn't particularly like to fight, but when he heard that the survival of his children was on the line, he didn't hesitate to go all out to protect his family. In doing so, he also sent a strong message to his offspring: if you want to make it, you're gonna have to fight. Rebelling against the gods means refusing to accept fate as it's been written for you, and struggling with all your power to make the life that you have selected, regardless of the price or consequences. No wonder why Adam is most people's favorite character. His indomitable spirit is contagious and makes him an incredible source of inspiration for anyone striving to improve themselves. Just like the Flying General, he symbolizes the power that can be obtained from a simple refusal to give up. Regardless of the situation, a one-track mind settled on always getting back up will stay a faithful ally to those willing to mobilize their spirits and get shit done. And if we're talking about persistence, then there's one man we must mention. Since the author of the manga is Japanese, it's not too surprising that one of the humans chosen to save the day would be a samurai. Throughout history, there have been dozens of ronins whose name entered the Great Book of Legends, and you often hear people question who, out of all of these valorous warriors, could be considered the strongest swordsman of all times. To some, the obvious answer would be Miyamoto Musashi, author of the Book of Five Rings, and overall Ubermensch who defeated and killed more than 60 men in single combat. His portrayal in the manga is a good physical representation of those feats, the illustrator opting to draw him with arms the size of oak trees, with veins running through them like he's opening his own irrigation business. It's like an endless male power fantasy where every single ripped dude from ancient history till now eventually makes an apparition. It's great. By the way, Musashi definitely took the neck pill. And considering the physiques of his fellow swordsmen, it's not the only pill they're taking. Forget whey protein, it's all about that anabolic rise. How else would you explain the fact that this guy's biceps are twice the size of his head? It's the bentos, I'm telling you. Quite refreshing to see samurais depicted as muscle-bound meatheads for once. They are usually drawn to be much skinnier. It's not all about the physique, however, as walking the way of the warrior also entails engaging in strenuous spiritual development. Just like lifting weights demands more than simply picking stuff up and putting them down. At some point, if you want to keep progressing, you need to develop your reasoning skills, and a lot of that comes through studying philosophy. Often, it is not the body that falters, but the spirit, and our last champion of humanity knows that better than anyone. Regardless of the obstacles that have stood in his way, he always managed to continue his journey. Even death wasn't strong enough of a deterrent to prevent him from pursuing true mastery of the soul and sword. This man, Sasaki Kojiro, is the mightiest swordsman of all time in this fictional universe, for one simple reason. Unlike his competitors, he never stopped training. He embodies the spirit of Bushido, an endless pursuit of perfection that can survive any setbacks, guided by a strict code of conduct and honed through rigorous martial practice. Far from having been born strong, he is the patron saint of every single guy that has to put in twice the work in order to get any results at all. Having been defeated times and times again by his contemporaries, he could have just slipped into despair and given up the sword entirely. But did he do that? Of course not. The way of the warrior is no place for a coward, and Sasaki is not a coward. Does he like training? You don't need to tell him twice. You can be sure that he'll be making his way into the mountains right away, ready to sharpen his skills with the fervor that only dudes with a passion for their craft can understand. In an endless quest to fight the strong, he moved from one challenge to another, overcoming every plateau and turning yesterday's limitations into nothing more than memories. For some, the promise of an arduous opponent is daunting. To him, it's like the best gift he could have wished for. You want to make his day? Show him an enemy he has no hope to defeat. Transcending Godhood? Please. Kojiro has transcended the very fabric of reality itself, so deep in the practice of his art that he is able to summon fearsome warriors through the power of his imagination alone, all of whom are of course jacked and covered in scars. You heard of shadow boxing, here's spirit slashing. 2 times the risks, 10 times the results. All this work serves only one goal: becoming stronger. Regardless of what you train for, your aim is to be better tomorrow than you were today. To do so, you will have to aim for slow and incremental progress, which is exactly what Sasaki did, as opposed to the gods who were just born into the supreme beings that they are, without ever having to put in any effort at all. This is what transcending godhood means: to go beyond our human condition and reach up to an ideal. If it didn't look unattainable, what would be the fun in even trying to grasp it in the first place? This slow grind up the mountain that led Kojiro to his level of excellence is the way, and knowing that there exist people who are ahead of you on that path should stimulate you into advancing even further on it. Not just for your own development, but also for the sake of all the others that will be coming after you and follow in your footsteps. So what if some people are born destined to reach the summit? The way of the warrior is not a track field, and anyone that you perceive as superior will eventually end up just a speck in your rearview mirror. Those who fall off the path weren't doomed to do so by destiny. They were cast away by their own inability to see the climb for what it is: the challenge of a lifetime. Only the weak-minded sees the road ahead and dreads its length. Regardless of the task, the winner will always be the one who stuck with it the longest. And when it comes to hammering away at something, there is not a single human on Earth that can match Sasaki. Not even a fight against a god was enough to make him despair, and even when he found himself drowning in the depths of the abyss, against all odds, he still summoned the strength to persevere. Struggle is a variable bestowed upon humans by destiny. You can either let it break you, or temper you into tougher steel. Compared to the never-ending thirst for growth that defines mankind, the concept of godship is laughably meek. All of the lordliness and might in the world cannot survive a confrontation with a being that simply refuses to stop advancing. And if the gods have their pride to rely on, we humans fuel our drive with an undying spirit of survival, based on the unshakable belief that we will live to see another day, something that our creators have never had to worry about, and which gives us the edge over them. This difference in determination can be felt throughout the entire tournament, and besides the muscular physiques and epic clashes that the show presents, I believe it to be the main reason why you should read/watch Record of Ragnarok. If you want more anime recommendations, check the description. And remember, regardless of the challenge ahead, as long as there is life, there is hope.